Hello, class. I wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you about the conclusion of Module 3 and highlight some of the important areas that I think that you should have picked up over these past few weeks, and also spend a little bit of time talking about your final project. So first, I wanted to talk about the stages of readiness to change. We as practitioners explore levels of readiness and motivation before deciding how to proceed in working with the clients. The first stage that we look at is pre-contemplation, and this is where the client may deny the problem or doesn't see that it's problematic, okay? And as practitioners, we need to focus on raising the client's awareness of the urgency of the issue and the pain and fear involved with that issue. For contemplation, the second stage, is where the individual acknowledges that they have a problem, but they're not quite ready for change, okay? It's helpful for the clinician to help the client identify the barriers or challenges to making those changes and work with small steps that can be proposed towards considering the change. The third stage is preparation. That's where the client's ready to change and they're actively looking for information, okay? And it's necessary for us as clinicians to explore the ambivalence of some members who are of the family or those who are providing support to the client that may keep them from making change or they may be inhibiting change. The next step is action. And that's where clients are ready to take those specific steps, okay? They may need little or no support from you as the social worker. And if we assume that the clients are at this stage, but they're not, it may make us as the practitioner feel frustrated. So if you're feeling frustrated that the client's not making the correct action steps, they're probably not there yet, okay? So only about a third of our clients come in actively in this action stage. So it's a misstep if you think that all clients are ready and motivated towards taking specific steps. The next step is maintenance. And during the maintenance stage, we have to understand that the pull to return to previous behavior is very strong at this point. So we need to help the client develop ways to cope with the temptations and to reward day-to-day successes. Small steps again. We're working with the client to help them maintain their change. And also, we need to talk about relapse and termination as the last stage of change. And relapse is common, and we need to prepare the client for this, for the possibility that relapse may occur. Okay, it definitely needs to be part of the process. And termination, and we'll get to this later, it really needs to be talked about from the beginning as well. Um, Termination is a big part of the whole clinical process or change process. Okay, so whenever we look at readiness to change, we need to assess the influence of the client's biopsychosocial aspects through the social cognitive theory. Okay, I think that's one really strong theory that's proposed in this course in order to do that. And basically, the theory considers the impact of the environment, personal, and behavioral factors on the readiness to change. Okay? The personal and environmental factors might include self efficacy, socioeconomic status, culture, and it asks, does the environment support change? And as we look at the environment, we also want to think of support that the client has or lack from the systems, the lack of support that the system provides. So if the client is in an extremely rural area, they may not have access to a lot of resources, or if they're economically challenged, or various myriad of other ways that the client's environment may be inhibiting some change. Behavioral and personal concerns also include the client's understanding. And we always have to seek to understand the client's perspective, right? Whenever we engaged in the last assignment, part of the reflective listening skills, asking open-ended questions, that's all part of gaining the client's perspective. We have to be very careful not to attribute our own beliefs and our own thoughts on the clients. We need to understand where the client is always and start with where the client is. And that's where these stages really come in hand, okay? We've been talking about the client's motivation towards change and how to apply intervention strategies. During the process, we work to identify the problems to develop strategies with the client. And that's really important to touch upon. You know, we're working with the client, we're gaining their perspective. As part of this stage, we also need to be aware of the ethical and obligations toward the client. And there are three that I want to stress about this process. The first is our need to support essential ethical principles related to autonomy and self-determination. Again, we need to allow the client to express what they want. You know, we are agents of change, and the client needs to direct that process, or not necessarily the process, but the outcome. We provide the process. Client decisions are influenced by their culture, gender, age, and other factors. And our role is to support the choices of the client, even if we feel the client should make other choices. And that's very important. We don't want to impose our outcomes on these clients. They're experts in their life. They know what's going to satisfy their needs. And it's our job to educate them and get them to the point of making those goals and following through with those goals. But the client needs to direct the process. Through understanding the client's perspective, their needs, and what they are ready to make, and that they're ready to make change, we work with the client to establish goals. Okay, and there are two styles of goal development discussed in the course: MAPS and SMART goals. Both are effective styles for goal formulation, and I don't think you really have to stick with just one. Okay. Um, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. But first, let's talk about MAPS goals: measurable, attainable, positive, and specific. So measurable and specific goals make it possible for the clients and the social worker to evaluate changes that have been made, and it provides a clear direction and focus for the work. Attainable goals uh, are something the client believes is possible based on the available resources such as time, money, and people power. Okay? Clients who participate in setting goals are more likely to believe goals are achievable. All right? Again, client centered. Goals should be visualized in concrete, specific behavioral terms. They have to be able to actually attain these goals. An attainable goal isn't changing another person, okay? And what I really like about the MAPS goals is the uh, drive to create positive goals. It keeps the focus on what the client wants to do rather than what the client doesn't want to do. And we can use open-ended questions to help clients think in more positive terms, okay? So that's the MAPS format. And again, what I really like is that movement towards positivity that SMART goals tend to not address. But I do prefer the SMART, every other aspect of the SMART goal development. So SMART goals need to be specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and timely, okay? Effective goals are clear and specific. They're measurable or verifiable. They're realistic. They have a reasonable chance of success. That's really important. We don't want to automatically let our clients set themselves up for failure. So breaking down goals into smaller goals, um, um, but adequate goals, to improve the situation is really important, okay? They need to be congruent with the client's value and cultural system and time specific. Um, make sure it's shorter periods of times with those smaller goals as opposed to the larger uh, uh, goals. Clients can become tired in the process and disengaged because they're not seeing progress. So if we can break up our goals into smaller goals, they're more likely going to continue through that pathway, okay? So as an example of a SMART goal, our client Donna, let's say that she has feelings of isolation. So in order for us to work towards a betterment of feeling less isolated and becoming more involved in her community, Donna may have worked with me as the social worker to set up the goal that she would attend 2 functions outside of her home by the next session. And this is specific. She knows that she needs to attend 2 functions, excuse me, outside of the home. And they could be anything that she chose to do. Measurable, you have 2 functions, right? Action oriented, Donna's doing the work. Realistic, Donna could indicate if she had transportation, maybe if she had the funds, or even if she didn't have the funds, maybe she had the ability to go to some free events, right? Even going to a park may be an event. And they're timely. So we've set up a time period in which Donna would have to attend 2 functions. So small, um, and it's attainable, it's specific, and I think this could really work with Donna to help open up her world to make her feel a little less isolated. And if you take gerontology in the future, isolation is a big issue with the elderly population or individuals with disabilities or maybe individuals with depression. So getting them outside of the house is a really good goal to start with, okay? So when we're engaged in the helping process and the change process, there are 2 considerations that are integral to address, especially during goal development, um, and that's understanding the client's problems. It can be complicated to understand what the client's problems really are. They may come in with a problem that they're presenting with, but there may be other issues, okay? The process of coming to an agreement on problems and goals involves thoughtful and complete assessment, and it's important to work with what the client is ready to solve and not what the social worker thinks is important. Okay? Again, it's client centered. It's also important to note that sometimes clients may not be ready to be engaged in this process. If they're dealing with a crisis, you may have to act without fully exploring all the problems. You may need to deal with the immediate situation that has to be dealt with first, okay? The client, or excuse me, the social worker may have to be more directive, and as the social worker, it's important to stay calm and remember that safety is the client's first priority. They may be in a situation where they're being abused. A safety plan is essential. They may be a danger to themselves or others. A safety plan is essential. Um, and it's important that even though we can be caught up in this crisis, that we need to use our listening skills and ask our questions for clarification and to be sure to express empathy and warmth. These individuals are dealing with such a hard time. It's important for us to remember those skills that sometimes is easy to throw out the window during situations like this. And these are times whenever I would argue they're most important, okay? And they're most important because you have to be more directive. So these expressing feelings of warmth and empathy is important for the client to understand that although you're being directive, you're working toward the benefit of the client. So we also have ethical obligations to evaluate the client's process as part of this stage, or excuse me, the client's progress as part of this stage. And the evaluation of progress is an ongoing process. It needs to be continuous. Social workers need to evaluate whether they have the skills and knowledge and abilities to work with a specific client. So even social work, self-evaluation is important. After each meeting with the client, the social worker should consider whether the work is leading to the achievement of the goals. The social worker should share his or her assessment progress and thoughts and feelings about the positive changes with the client. It's, and you need to help clients monitor their own progress, and that will help increase their confidence. Okay? So, another huge part of this process is ending and termination. Ending begins with the first session. Uh, and we should discuss termination from the beginning because it's such a significant event in the lives of many clients. We work very hard to create ethical relationships with boundaries, but these relationships are still very important, and the client may become dependent on the social worker during this process. So, if clients conclude the relationship without sharing some of these feelings, they may experience a sense of incompleteness, and this unfinished quality may impede the appropriate process of uh, psychological separation from the social worker and inhibit the client's movement toward increased autonomy and independence. When our clients leave us, we want them to know that they can come back if they need our assistance. But we don't want to set them up for a situation where that's going to be automatically apparent. We want them to feel self confidence whenever they leave and confident to be able to deal with their challenges, okay? And social workers also experience various feelings themselves. So we really need to work with the client in the ending process, okay? So those are the concepts that I really wanted to touch base with you on from your reading and in Module 3. But I also wanted to touch base with you in regard to your program concept paper. And first, I want to impart on you the reason why I assigned this as a group project. Some of your groups may be working swimmingly, and some of you may be experiencing difficult issues, okay? Maybe some group member isn't responding or pulling their fair weight. And this is similar to what we deal with as social workers out in the field. We have to work in teams, multidisciplinary teams, other group activities throughout our career. And sometimes they can even be distance based. So it's important that we garner these skills actively engaged in the learning process. So that's why I assigned this project the way I do. And that's why I require the evaluation at the end because I want to understand how the group performed and also how the individuals performed based upon the principles that we've learned in this course, okay? So, your project should identify the social justice issue. And I know a few of you have struggled with identifying a social justice issue. You get really close, but you're missing the integral component. And in order for there to be a social justice issue, one group has to be marginalized or treated differently than another. Okay? And this could be due to various reasons. So, as part of your paper, I really want you to spend time in helping me understand why your social justice issue is a social justice issue. Okay? And we do this through the conducting of research, of refereed articles, and other supporting uh, information that you found through utilizing Concord's database and other means. Okay? So you use this to also develop your literature review. Now, the literature review is a separate component. It's still integrated in the paper, but I want it as a separate heading. So if I were you, I would start with social issue as heading number 1. Literature review, uh, heading number 2, and both of these would be level 1 headings. Now, in APA style, excuse me. So, under your literature review, you want your literature broken up into themes that were relevant and evident throughout your literature search. And always remember, and if you've had me for research, you've seen this before, your literature is an upside down triangle, okay? So you want to start broadly and talk about those elements that inform the reader of your issue and work down to the point of the triangle, which is the narrow point of your issue, okay? So you'll have more information starting from the top, the more general information, and you'll work towards that conclusion or that question at times, okay? So the bottom of that triangle would be your social justice issue in the area in which you're proposing um, uh, your intervention or your program, okay? So, as part of this process, I do want you to interview with a professional social worker in the community that's dealing with the social issue or dealing with the community in which you want to be involved, okay? I want you to design your program. Now, I would have the social justice issue, level heading. I would have literature review, level heading, and then I would have interviews. Okay. Now here I would talk about my first interview and then my second interview, which we'll talk about in a minute, but that focuses on the change. Following your interview section, I would then talk about the design of my program and have various subheaders based upon that design. So you would want to talk about all aspects of the social justice issue and how your program is addressing that. Okay. Um, then once you've developed or have a good idea of your program, you should have taken that back to your social work professional and have them weigh in on it. So as part of your next section, I want you to talk about the changes that you made in the program design that was based on the feedback from the professional. Separately from this assignment, I do want you to provide your assessments, and I'll get to that in a second. But I don't want you to freak out if you've designed it a little differently. I want you to remember that this project and this process is all about working together and developing a program for a social justice issue. So as long as you have the literature review element, you've connected your project to the literature, you've engaged in your interviews, you'll be fine. And I want you to have fun with this, and I want you to be creative, and I want you to utilize and be attuned to those skills that you've been reading about and understanding throughout the semester, okay? And also, don't discount some of the discussions that we've been having in class with special topics because those are social justice issues. You've been working all along with social justice concerns and forming a scope of uh, intellectual discussion based upon those. So you should be an old hat at this now, okay? So as far as your assessments, I want you to provide an assessment. Usually Likert scales work best on every group member, including yourself, and then also on the group itself, based upon its performance as a whole. Okay? I want you to submit those separately, but I want you to provide a blank copy of whatever assessment it is you've designed as a group with your paper. So complete the assessment and turn that in separately, but include a blank copy of the assessment as part of your paper. I hope that makes sense. And what that shows me is that you've worked together to develop a unified assessment that's attached to your paper, but then you're giving me feedback on how the other group how the other group members have worked, and how the group has worked separately through a separate submission. And both there's submission portals for both. Uh, the group only has to submit one paper, but everyone has to submit an assessment. Okay. And be prepared. If you weren't very engaged in the group process, don't expect for your grade to be the grade of other group members. So it's really important that you engage in this process, that you're very clear with everyone's participation and how involved they are, because I do want this to be a fair process. As always, feel free to use the open discussion post to ask questions or email me with additional questions. And know that I'm here to help. So enjoy the rest of the semester. Get those papers in. If you have late assignments, remember that those are due very soon. And thanks a lot for your time. Take care.